Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Prathamesh Prabhudasai, co-founder and CEO of SafeBVM. Prath, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, guys.
Well, I often say this, but I feel like this has been a long time coming because we've been communicating back and forth about you coming on the show. As always, you've been making awesome progress, so we can't wait to tell the listeners all about that. But again, while we start these things, we want to set the stage. So tell us, what is that big problem that SafeBVM is looking to solve?
Sure. So back in 1950s, even before the FDA started, there was this company called Ambu that came up with the resuscitation bag technology. So anytime someone cannot breathe by themselves, providers use the bag and the mask to deliver air to patients. And very often they squeeze the bag too forcefully, causing complications. Air enters the stomach distends, the patient vomits, and the vomit enters their lung, causing all sorts of complications. So what we did is we built a simple technology that works with any commercially available bag and helps the provider to deliver much safer breaths to the patient.
And before we go too deep into the solution, I want to really nail in on this because, I saw a staggering statistic according to studies that ineffective manual ventilation with a bag valve mask, the BVM, can lead to hypoxia in up to 50% of patients during resuscitation attempts. I mean, that stat seems hard to believe. Can you tell us more about it?
It's crazy. So very recently, I would say starting from 2022, there's been a lot of publications that have come out on this problem. So in 2000s, everyone focused just on compression. So let's just get chest compressions right, and they ignored ventilation. And what we've seen is that doing adequate ventilation along with chest compression, that can 4 times increase neurologically intact survival rate. So that means when the patient comes back, they are able to function as they functioned before. So that's really critical. And then another thing that we've seen, so this was just for cardiac arrest, but then in opioid overdose, around 2 to 3x increase in survival. And the most significant has been in traumatic brain injury, where the first 5 minutes of care is super critical. There are large studies showing that if you deliver optimum ventilation in moderate to severe TBI patients, you can 5x increase the survival rate. So it's super critical, and it's just past 5 to 10 years, the evidence is just increasing about this problem.
It's crazy that it's A, so overlooked, but B, the potential, that 5x figure, that's massive. And another thing coupled with this, we were just discussing before coming online here, was about the healthcare workforce. We were talking about the number of people who obviously are potentially using this approach, and of course the challenges they have because they're maybe not doing it regularly. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So these resuscitator bags, there are around 1 million sold in pre-hospital. So EMS, your fire departments, your ambulances, police vehicles. So all of them use around 1 million bags, single-use bags each year. And you'll see that the number of providers exceeds 1 million. So each provider does not use bags that often. And then for most of these jobs, you have very high staff turnover. So whatever they learn in their training, it's replaced with someone who's fresh to the job. So it's challenging to maintain that level of competence in the organization because these providers have to learn all sorts of things. So ventilation is just one piece of the puzzle, but delivering good care to patients requires a lot of things. So our position is hey, let us solve this training issue with a medical device that your providers can use. That way you don't have to keep training and retraining them on the same skill, and they can do other skills and master other skills, and you're outsourcing that skill retention to a technology.
So again, Kyle, Prath is teasing us a little bit here with what the solution is.
Yeah, well, what sounds really interesting too, Prath, is that clearly this type of product's been around for a long time, and it's just fascinating to me that there really hasn't been what seems to be as much focus on innovation as, what you've kind of mentioned and discussed. So, I'm curious, is that really the case, or have there been other technologies and products maybe that of that tried to come to market too, obviously before Safe BVM came along? Is there anything else out there right now that's trying to kind of improve outcomes in those areas?
Definitely. So other technologies and other companies have tried this. So one example is, so with resuscitation bags, there are many parameters that matter. So one company reduced the size of the bag. So instead of like having large bags, they just reduce the size of the bag. And their thought process was that if we reduce the size of the bag, then the complications of like doing too much would be reduced, which in principle makes a lot of sense. But there was a 2000 patient study on the West Coast, or like Seattle area, which showed that with the smaller resuscitator bags, there was actually a 7% decrease in survival rates for cardiac arrest patients. And they couldn't pinpoint exactly what parameter with that bag was getting it wrong, but in general, based on existing evidence, what we know is that for patients over 5'10" or someone who has a beard, you need larger tidal volumes to deliver adequate air to that patient. So just by reducing the size of the bag, it might not be the perfect solution, as it focuses more on a certain group of patients, whereas the group that's outside of that is not adequately ventilated.
Fascinating. So it sounds like then you might have, two solutions, right? You've got a clinical solution that I think, is probably what the people want to really hear about. But it sounds like there's obviously a training problem too, because, these providers of a manual resuscitator, they're only using it 1 to 2 times a year. So you're trying to solve, it sounds like, two problems. Why don't you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, exactly. I think you have the spot on where, and what you will see is most of the companies in this space, they target this from one or the other aspect. So there are med device manufacturers who have traditionally been consumable manufacturers, and then there are sensor companies like monitoring companies that have more, I guess, electronic software expertise, and that they have built-in solutions from that angle. The position that we took is, because funding is minimal for many of these departments, they have very thin budgets. How do we like build them a complete solution that is also very affordable?
Mm.
So we took an approach of building sensors and software through some of our federal funding, and also a medical device. So we ensure that providers get trained well in their training setting, but when they go to the field, they have a medical device to remind them of that training, where that medical device also has some built-in capabilities, and it's called the forcing function, where it forces the right actions for that particular patient. So yeah, we have a twofold solution that includes like some sensor-based technology and like a consumable medical device that targets all aspects of the problem.
Okay, so then let's get into real quick is it the SOTER
Yes.
IQ, the training
Yeah.
solution. So I believe that's your sensor. Tell us a little bit about that technology and how it works.
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So we are federally funded, and we have an NIH grant that focuses on, we have a 310 patient clinical trial running at Brown University Health, and we built some sensors and software to help support data collection. But what we quickly saw is that EMS providers were really getting attracted to this technology, just because this was the first time they were seeing all of their ventilation parameters. So we measured pressure, volume going into the patient, volume coming out of the patient, the time over which they're squeezing the bag. So pretty much everything that would impact how they squeeze the bag is measured and monitored and tracked with this product, with SOTER IQ. But SOTER IQ also includes SOTER device, which is a novel flow limiting device. So it looks super simple, but the real novelty of SOTER is that that valve that sits inside, it's a flow limiting valve. So if someone has a collapsed lung, or they have an obstruction, like let's say they have asthma, automatically that device will deliver pressures that are safer for that patient. So instead of it being like a static technology, it really takes into account what's on the other end of the bag to deliver more personalized care to that patient.
Okay, so when you have folks out there maybe that are squeezing the bag too hard, maybe it sounds like your clinical solution would help prevent, too much airflow, right,
Exactly.
entering the patient so that there's less complications and challenges.
Exactly.
This is awesome. I love the way that you're thinking about this with those two problems, because clearly inside the hospital setting, there's a lot of technology, and there's a lot for people to keep up with in terms of understanding how that's being used. And on the face of it, something like this might seem like a really simple piece of apparatus, but clearly, there's opportunity to innovate, opportunity to improve. Maybe you could start to tell us a little bit more now about the sort of use cases you're chasing. So you're thinking about, going to market. Clearly, this bag is found in a lot of places. Like, are there specific examples that you're honing in on to get started?
Yeah, I think one of our key successes has been in Colorado. So city of Colorado Springs Fire, Colorado Springs AMR, through that interglobal medical response, they have been using the product for over, I would say, a year and a half. And then we've had another one of our longest users in city of St. Charles, and that's been, I think, over 2 years now. So that was our first customer, and they love the product, and they'll soon be sharing some of their clinical outcomes data with the EMS community. The funny thing with city of St. Charles, and we didn't even know when we went in, is that they were targeting this particular solution more for their opioid overdose patients. So in opioid overdose, Narcan is what is used, but there's like no FDA cleared technology for opioid induced respiratory depression. And that's what we are targeting as our next claim is hopefully we'll be like the first technology as a medical device targeting opioid induced respiratory depression. So that I would say that is like pretty exciting for us.
And I wanted to just go back to something you mentioned a couple of times was around federal funding. It's a pretty topical matter right now about what happens to our dollars that go into this type of innovative research. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about how important that's been to leverage your technology and to take it where it is today.
Yeah, I would say it's been very instrumental. So, for example, like one key challenge in pre-hospital and in the EMS setting is the reimbursement. So, like the reimbursement codes don't pay that much to private ambulance services. So there is literally no incentive to improve outcomes. They are treated more as a transportation company. So in a situation like that, where you don't have clear reimbursement, but the departments clearly deliver a lot of value, and there's so much evidence showing how pre-hospital improves outcomes in markets like these. I feel where reimbursement hasn't caught up yet, federal funding would be really, really valuable. And that's what it's been for us, where the clinical trial to show some data on the Soter device that was federally funded. It's 310 patients showing non-inferiority to a mechanical ventilator, and we've enrolled, I would say, around 280 patients now, and it looks very promising. And then more on the Department of Defense side too, where they see a lot of value in specifically prolonged field care, and in certain areas, like for example during COVID-19, when there's like a crisis situation and you rapidly need to deploy a lot of people, sometimes you don't have enough staff. How do you rapidly bring someone who's less trained up to speed to deliver care in like a few minutes, but care as good as some of your most trained people? That's where our technology really comes into picture.
What's interesting too, Prath, is that you think about the problems that patients can experience and what can occur if you're not treated properly, in this emergency setting, right? And the better you can treat these patients early and often, they're going to experience hopefully less challenges later on, right? And I mean, you can think that what happens when patients don't have the oxygen flow that they need and the brain injury that can occur. And now you've got these people that are suffering with long-term illnesses, diseases, or whatever it is, right? That's costing the healthcare system just millions and millions of dollars that could have potentially been avoided, right?
Exactly.
Through one small, and I don't want to, but very simple, right? I always do this simple because nothing's ever simple in the world of medical device and what we're out here developing. But the reality is that it really seems like, your valve is such a simple solution. So, it's fascinating. It's a little frustrating too, to be honest. It's a little upsetting to hear that, there's that lack of reimbursement there, because I mean, I think the future of healthcare and medical device in general is like, how can we fix this problem? How can we help patients before it turns into something worse?
Exactly. So specifically in some disease states like traumatic brain injury, it is super critical to at the point of care, and that's where I think that CapCat grant also was a point of care grant. Is how do you like give the best care, very quickly, so you minimize those downstream complications. I think that's really critical, and I feel EMS has like well-equipped EMS has an important role to play in that.
Yeah, this is such a great point to make. I mean, clearly the cost to the patient who is, primarily affected, the cost to the healthcare system, but also the cost to society. There's like a perfectly potentially functioning person who can add value and be productive. And so that's something else to consider as well as we think about this. I wanted to turn the corner a little bit now to sort of understand better, like, how are you getting this to market? Like, what are those distribution channels? This is something we spoke about in our last episode, and how, there's different ways to get your products into the hands of the patients and into the hands of the providers who are using these. But again, it's a challenging thing to do. So I'd love to hear more about your experience and how you're approaching it.
Yeah, I would say the first year and a half we went direct to market. So we really wanted to learn from our customers and see how their experiences with the technology. So we had a limited market release where we picked a few key sites. We tracked their data. It showed really good improvement. That data was presented at EMS conferences. Well, there's another conference, I think it's AAE. The abstract was selected there for presentation too. So like going direct for some time and just like learning from the market really helped us like iron out our messaging, iron out like the training and the implementation plan. And while doing this, we are now in over 100 cities all over the country. So that's really exciting. And then starting from this year, we signed on a few strategic distributors, so specialty distributors, and 2025 is mainly going to be scaling through these distributors. But at the same time, now we're working with BVM manufacturers. So companies that make the BVM will have this device pre-connected to their technology. So one of the largest manufacturers of BVM, the company that first invented this in 1950s, is a qualified referral partner in USA, and now they are also working on getting this pre-connected to their tech. So that's pretty exciting for us. So we like after learning all these things from the market and like having like a good training solution deployed in the form of software and sensors, I think we are ready to scale with these good high quality channel partners.
Well,
You know,
one, that's awesome to hear. Sorry, Cal, I just wanted to just
oh
follow up
yeah,
because there's a couple
go
of
for
things
it.
here. One, that's awesome to hear about, like, 100 cities getting, widespread use of this amazing technology. But secondly, just something I wanted to highlight the point you made about going out there yourself in that first year and a half, because I think for other founders listening in, that's so important that you're going out there as a CEO and actually listening to your customers and getting that first-hand feedback, and you're not relying on second-hand information. And I think that's really great advice for anyone listening in as a leader. We speak to a lot of leaders a lot of the time, and I think it's something that's often overlooked about how important that is to understand your customer, to understand what's going on in the marketplace, and really pick up that information firsthand. So again, great to see you doing that, and amazing again to hear about all the fantastic progress you're making.
I think that it's not just me. So I have a co-founder and we have inside salesperson. So like, all of us are like positioning ourselves to be in front of the customer, and how do you like, have the right team who's ready and customer facing and being hands-on. So I would say like more than me, my co-founder, like, spent a lot of time with the customers while I was focusing on the clinical trial aspect.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually, Richard, I was just as excited to kind of chime in here because I want to go back to, you know, this go to market. It's very holistic go to market, right? I mean, you're literally supplying EMS, right, with the valve and the training solution, But then here you are also talking to the OEM of the bags, and you're incorporating now the valve into their bag design, right? And I'm just curious, you're also out there in the field, like Richard was mentioning, which is incredibly valuable. You know, what's kind of that user interface, user experience for someone who might be buying the valve that's not already, you know, integrated into the bag where they need to do it themselves?
So you're absolutely right. So many of our customers are actually doing that right now, and they would prefer if it's pre-connected because it just like, takes out that extra step from them. So
Yeah.
like for example, one of our customers was Pro EMS and Cambridge Fire, and their challenge was, hey, how do we ensure that this
Mm.
is coming pre-connected? So that was like a big thing for them. And like customers like those where like they might not have the resources to like ensure that everything is connected, like for them, outsourcing it to the manufacturer where everything comes ready as like something that can be deployed immediately in an emergency. I
Yeah.
think that's a major value add.
I would agree with that. I mean, when people are in high pressure situations, and you need to act super fast, I mean, I can imagine the last thing, people want to be, doing is fumbling around with a valve, an extra component that they need to quickly pop into something. And, but what I do find fascinating is that when I do look at your product online, well, at least it shows again a very what looks to be straightforward, simple design, and you're talking about literally like, hey, this is like a 30-second explanation here, and to show you how to pop it right in, right? So at the end of the day, at least it doesn't seem like, that this is really a challenge, but I think it's one of those things where, that they want to still be rest assured that, if they are going to put this valve in themselves, they're going to get the same, if not better, results when they're treating their patient. They can do it quick, easy, with no worry in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great point to highlight, Cal, because I think it talks back to that learning. You've obviously learned through this process of like the feedback, and then you've integrated that into thinking about, well, how do we get this really robust supply chain for our customers who are bringing them a sort of ready to go product? Exciting. What lies ahead? What's coming up in the next 12 to 18 months for you guys?
I would say like one exciting piece is all of our clinical trials and studies should be coming out, and because we haven't released any of that data because they haven't like fully been analyzed yet.
Mm.
So that would be really exciting, getting some good quality data out there. But also like we're working on partnering with a few strategic research companies that document actual improvement in neurologically intact survival rates. So they have data showing what happened to this patient, not just during that episode of care when they entered the hospital and once they left the hospital, were they like, did they have neurologically intact survival? So they have registries. So we are partnering with them, and you'll soon be able to get like actual real life data out on these patients that were impacted by the technology. So it's I would say like very powerful for a small company to say that here are the 100 patients who used our technology, or on whom our technology was used, and they are neurologically intact survival rates. That's just so powerful for a med device company to be able to track those outcomes on a patient level. So I think in the next 18 months, I feel you'll get to see a lot of that coming from SafeBVM.
I mean, the fact that you got this far,
Mm.
right, without having that type of data published, I think it shows, the value and impact that you were able to make very quickly with your technology. So yeah, that is exciting news. And I'm curious now that you say this, was that regulatory process? Was that like, did you have to do a submission 510K, or right? Okay, cool.
Yeah, we are FDA 510K cleared, so
Yeah.
it
Got
was
it.
it was an intensive process.
Oh, I bet it was.
Yeah, but still, like I think the reason, like for us, and the reason why we need that outcomes data is because it helps in a space where reimbursement is not that much. It really helps you to make a case to cities and to the funders that this is actually saving lives, and that's how it helps drive up, and it's honestly funded by the federal government. most of our research studies showing these outcomes.
No, that's fantastic. And it's really cool too, Richard. I don't know if you saw this or not, but on the website, you can actually order your sample today. So that's pretty cool. I like how you're doing that, Prath.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, Kyle. I think for anyone who's listening in, it's like one, great technology, great device, great reach already.
Yeah.
And thirdly, obviously, great data coming through. So again, for anyone listening, go to the website. Where else can they expect to see you? You traveling? What's coming up in the sort of the next few months for you?
I would say like not much travel next few months, but yeah, we are actually working with JP Morgan on this investor focus event and finance focus event. So that's going to be super exciting. It's the first time, they've like agreed to like, host an event just for us. So that's super cool. And I know you're
For
going to be there, Richard. So I'm
Wednesday,
excited.
5th of March, I would not miss it. I'm looking forward to it. So for anyone listening, yeah, that's coming around the corner soon. And so yeah, looking forward to it. Awesome, man. This has been incredible. You are making such amazing progress. Thank you enough for all you're doing to improve healthcare.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before we let you go, how do the folks get in touch with you?
Oh, you can reach out as in with me, like you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but if you want to get in touch with us as a company, you can go to safebvm.com. So safety, safe, and then BVM is for bag valve mask. So that's the device that we improve.
Awesome. Thanks again, man. This is fantastic.
Likewise, thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to our guest, Prath Prabhudasai, co-founder and CEO of SafeBVM, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.